Welcome to GPS, another Zoom version, and this one is high testosterone, folks. Viana is in the process of giving birth, as we've been looking forward to for some time, and Shifra is not able to be with us today, but we trust she will be back with us soon. But we have some high-power testosterone here, and we're going to make a program for you that I think you will enjoy very, very much. And I'm Jon Paulien. I'm a professor of religion at Loma Linda University, and I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves. First, Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Kelly, lead pastor of the Mount Rubidoux Seventh-day Adventist Church in Riverside, California.
All right, and Nick.
Hey, I'm Nick. I'm the youth pastor at the Azure Hills Church in Grand Terrace, California.
All righty, and Guillermo.
And I'm Guillermo Borda, and I am a PhD student at Andrews University.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys being with us today. And we have a very exciting text today, and that is Revelation 12 and verse 17. And I'd like one of you to read that text if you have it in front of you. Okay.
I'll grab it.
Yeah.
I'm reading from the New King James Version, Revelation 12:17. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ.
All right. So the dragon here is somebody we have seen all the way along. And the woman is someone we've seen all the way along in this chapter. But the woman kind of disappears. She's mentioned here, but she's not part of the story anymore. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts? What happened to the woman? Any ideas?
Well, you have that part in the narrative in which the woman flees, right? It flees that when the dragon, in verse 13, the dragon pursued the woman. And then the woman flees. There's these two wings, and then the woman receives help from the earth, and then you arrive to where we are right now in the point of the narrative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the woman has been central to the story, but what happens to her now? I mean, you would think if the woman represents the people of God, wouldn't she be there at the end time as well? Well, we're not the only ones to ponder this and wonder about this because it is a reality. Actually, there are 4 women in the book of Revelation. You have the woman Jezebel, chapter 2. You have the woman of chapter 12. You have the woman of chapter 17. And you have the bride of the Lamb in chapter 19. And scholars have noticed that 2 of those are on the right side and 2 of those are negative in the book. Any relation between the woman of 12 and any of these others, do you think?
I remember my professor from Andrews University, Denis Fortin, saying that the woman in 12 eventually becomes the woman in 17.
All right, and on what basis do you think you would make such a suggestion?
Well, the woman representing the church, and the church starting off faithful and over time apostatizing and kind of falling away from being the faithful people of God. And it seems that actually seems, well, in the commentaries that I've looked at, it stopped saying that the dragon was making, war with the woman after this. It's going more after the seed, the remnant. So those that came from the woman, and it starts to identify the faithful as particularly her offspring, those who in this verse it says have or keep the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. So it seems that something happens to to the woman between 12 and 17.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do we know that the woman of 12 is positive?
Well, in the beginning of chapter 12, we have the description in verses, right in the beginning, let me get there, verses 1 and 2, you have the reference to sun, moon, and 12 stars. And that may be an allusion to that dream by Joseph, where he saw the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down to the star of Joseph, thus being an indication that this represents the people of God, but also that she was pregnant and then has this baby that goes to heaven to rule. So this is a positive character. Her child is positive. And of course, I mean, there is that this represents the people of God may also be reinforced by the fact that often in the Old Testament, God will represent his people as a woman. But one thing I'm pondering, and this is a tentative position that I have, I would say, I think it's very healthy. You know, I would probably like to think that most of my interpretations are somewhat provisional because we can always learn, but this is maybe especially so. I wonder if the woman and her children, to a certain degree, are not one and the same, because you may refer to Israel as a woman and the children of Israel as the people of Israel, but at the end of the day, they are all one and the same. But just that the children, you may be referring more to in this way as a plural of individuals, and the woman is a corporate, singular, symbolic character representing that body that has many individuals. So I would say, in that sense, I would say the woman is here as her seeds. If this interpretation is correct, but like I said, it's tentative and that could be missing the mark. But to another extent, if what Nick said is correct, right, then maybe part of the woman goes on in a different direction, and you have almost like, it becomes more complicated.
Well, is the woman of 17 also positive?
I would think the woman with 17 would be positive because the dragon wouldn't be enraged with her if it wasn't. I mean, the dragon really is the antithesis of whatever, obviously this woman represents. And so we know already in scripture the dragon represents this anti-God mindset, this deceiving kind of mindset as we've looked earlier in Revelation 12. So if he's enraged with the woman, I would think that anyone who comes from that place of evil and deception would be enraged with positivity and truth.
So you're inclined to think the woman of 17 might also be positive, which would certainly fit what Nick was saying. I'll give you one more. In verses 4 and 5 of chapter 17, we will get to those later on in this series. But in 17:4 and 5, the woman's dress is described, and it parallels the high priest. So there's something very godly about the woman of chapter 17. So making a connection between the two. And by the way, where is the woman in 17? She's in the desert.
I was going to say with
the place is the woman of 12. Yeah. Verse 3 of 17 says that, that the woman sitting on a beast and goes out into the desert. And then she's described like the high priest and so forth. So a parallel between these two women, like Guilherme was saying, let's call this tentative. Let's be open to correction. But a relationship between the two is very possible. But it's clear in chapter 17 that the woman is not on God's side. So what do you make of that?
And this is kind of what I was trying to get at, that to a certain degree, the rest of the children of the woman are the woman itself, but there's another side in which, and I'm going to try to clarify the first part just a second, but the other side is that it seems that this woman has split, so to speak, because it is possible, it is at least a plausible interpretation of chapter 12, verse 17, to take this expression, because what's the meaning of the expression, the rest of her children? It's interesting because when it says the rest of her children, it doesn't use the same word as the word child when it says that she's about to give birth. So, which could mean that these are not the same kind of children as this child. Maybe this child is unique as well. We've seen it as a unique child already, but because it's sperma, it's from the word sperma, the seed, the descendants, the progeny. So the rest of her progeny. The question is, if you have the rest of her progeny, maybe there is part of her progeny that the dragon is not against. And that's where it becomes a little bit puzzling, because in one possible meaning of this word, the sperma, if you check Bauer in the dictionary, especially I would say with this modification, the rest is that it is like a few survivors which will constitute a new generation. It's almost like when in Romans 9:29, when it refers to this, there's a few, now we can kind of begin this notion of the remnant in the Old Testament, that some have remained faithful and they can keep going. So maybe there was a split in the woman.
Okay, yeah, and I think just a little sideline that maybe our audience needs to know. I think one of the things that Guilherme was just struggling with is the idea that Greek Western thinking is sort of all or nothing thinking, and Hebrew thinking is much more open to saying both and, that this could be Israel and also the children of Israel at the same time, that Jesus could be fully God and fully human. In the Greek Western sense, that's 200%, which is impossible. Okay, but in the Hebrew mindset, completely God, completely human is not impossible. That it is a tension that is possible to hold. So Michael and Nick, thinking about this, what do you do with so much Christian imagery here in a figure that's totally negative at the end of time, Babylon? What do you make of that?
Well, I think with the imagery, what first comes to mind is that you can look a part, but not actually be the part, right? So you could wear the robes, you could, all of that, but it's your actions, it's who you are that actually defines your character.
Okay, you were going to say, Michael?
Yeah, I think something similar to Nick. One of the things that one of my teachers, Pastor Henry Wright, and one of my mentors said, that people in the end, most people will be lost because of bad religion and not no religion at all. And I think one of the things that we see with all this Christian imagery, and I think in the last days, I think what we're going to see is a very twisted view of what Christianity really is. I mean, even down to the idea, which I know we'll get into a little later, of righteousness by works, versus righteousness by faith. Both of them have a Christian language, but one is very pagan, but it's clothed in Christian kind of language. And so when I see this Christian language used in Babylon, I think it's an idea that we need to be aware that, these deceptions are not going to be just so black and white. It'd be so easy if the devil came to you, of course, in a pitchfork and said, hey, let's do all this sin. But when he comes in some kind of righteousness, when he comes clothed as a high priest, and that's what, of course, we know with the false Trinity that is impersonating, the Godhead, which I know we'll get into, a little later. So that's why I think that language is used. I think it's to give the reader the message that, hey, there's going to be a false kind of Christianity, a false revival that will be led by this dragon and the beast.
And, it's kind of painful to talk about that because when we talk about that, there's always the danger that we think we're better than somebody else, you know. But the reality is, one of the key elements of the book of Revelation is the idea of a cosmic conflict. And the cosmic conflict is over the character of God. It's between God and Satan. And in Revelation's picture of the universe, which makes a ton of sense, because how do you make sense of a messed up world if God is good and powerful? Well, you make sense of that best when you realize there are other forces at work, and that there are reasons why these forces are given the opportunity to work. And if that's the case, then God and Satan are both at work in every situation. God and Satan are at work in every religion. They're at work in every political party. And by the way, we're talking about politics, which we don't want to talk about, but just in general principle, to commit to one side or the other politically and saying this side is pure and the other side is evil, which I hear way too much of, both ways, you know. The reality is Satan's at work both ways, and God is at work both ways. And scripture is given so we can discern what is truth and what is error. One of the keys to Satan's methodology is deception. He's a shapeshifter, you know, from 7-head, 10-horn beast to 7-head, 10-horn beast with crowns in a different place to a 2-horn beast. And he's constantly shape-shifting and trying to show himself off in a different context. So the idea that you have a pure symbol, a pure woman, woman is conflicted in the Old Testament. Israel isn't always on God's side. And so right within the root of the imagery itself is the possibility for this kind of confusion. And Revelation is telling us that as we approach the end, to simply say, I'm going to pick a side and stick with it and I'll be good, may not be wise. And I got you, Mike, but just a sec. One more thing I need to say. While there's always the danger of putting ourselves up over others when we identify Satan's working in other places, we want to keep in mind that the line between good and evil is not between us and them. The line between good and evil runs down the middle of our own hearts. All right. So to identify evil in the other is useful primarily to help us see the evil in ourselves. You know, Jesus said, it's easy to see the speck in someone else's eye. It's hard to see the beam in our own. So the ultimate goal of harlots in Revelation, of evil beasts, etc., is not so we can say, wow, you know, everybody else must be really bad, but to say, could I be that one? Is it I, Lord? All right, Michael, sorry to run the train here too long.
No, it was actually a question, because I think what you said somewhat goes in, I don't know if opposition is the word, but, you know, in, you know, Adventist theology, you know, the woman represents this church, right? And it's the pure church, and it's always under attack. So there's never anything wrong with that woman, you know, it's pure. So I just think I'm just wondering how would you, you know, maybe reconcile some of what we're saying with the idea that, man, you know, this represents this church that has fled and persecution, the remnant of her seed. See, we're the remnant. You know, we don't like to look within the remnant for any kind of, you know, issues and thoughts. I was just wondering your thoughts.
Well, I remember a while back, and I should have given you two opportunity. Either of you have something you want to jump in?
The only thing I want to clarify is that, I'll be very honest, I was a little bit confused in the beginning of the conversation when you mentioned 17. I was not sure if you were referring to verse 17 in chapter 12 or chapter 17, which makes a huge difference, right? So I just want to clarify, like, that in verse 17, chapter 12.
You were careful to cover both, right? So
yeah, I would know. First I said something, but then I was like, I was not sure, you know, but just in case anyone out there got confused, you know, in chapter 12, verse 17, we have a very nice lady. It is in chapter 17 that, you know, things are kind of complicated.
Very good. Well, I just wanted to respond to Michael a little bit here. About 20 years ago, somebody decided to mail a whole bunch of the book, I think it's Bible Readings for the Home Circle. It's a book that's like 100 some years old. And in that book, it had some harsh things to say about the medieval church, which today we would call the Roman Catholic Church. And it was mailed all over Washington, D.C. and surroundings. It hit the AP, Associated Press, CNN, Washington Post, New York Times. Everybody was talking about this scandalous knocking down of another church. And the president of the General Conference was in real concern. We need to have a response to the news media. And he delegated 4 people to write a response, and then they would blend the 4 of them together to send it out. I happen to be one of those 4 people. And so what do you say at a time like that? You know, if somebody takes this stuff and says, I'm going to use it to trash others and feel great about myself, how would you respond? How would you defend such an action?
Do you need
If
do you
you
need
were
to
asked,
defend that action?
Yeah.
you were asked, Nick, you were asked to make the church look good in the light of one of its members having sent this book out that happened to rub the editor of one of the major newspapers the wrong way. Or I think it was the Associated Press. That gets to all the newspapers. How would you defend what Seventh-day Adventists have taught about the medieval church?
Well, I know our natural reaction is to defend. And sometimes I think we don't need to defend. Sometimes I think we need to acknowledge, oh, we made a mistake, whatever the case may be. I don't think I've read that particular book, so I'm not exactly sure what is said.
It's standard stuff. It simply got into the hands of someone who wasn't prepared to actually handle it.
Yeah.
Someone very influential.
Right. Yeah. So the question one more time, my first reaction is we don't always need to defend ourselves.
Okay. Just let it go. Just don't respond.
No. Not just not defend ourselves, but acknowledge inappropriate behavior.
I'm always, particularly with some of the things in Revelation with the idea of this woman in the remnant, I'm always surprised with the stance that we take, because we also believe that Laodicea is, representing this, the time period of which we're in and who this church is. And what is the issue with Laodicea? For all intents and purposes, it's an issue of self-awareness. They think that they have all of these pieces to the puzzle lined up, but they're still blind, poor, wretched, and naked. And one of the things I've always, thought where we have to be very careful of, that I think Revelation brings out with this whole idea, even of the clothing and the language, is that you can have all the right information, but not have the transformation. Like, you can have the information on what it is, but not how to treat people. I'm always reminded of a few quotes. Forgive me for not being able to get exactly where they're from, with all the compilations, unfortunately, put together. But I really appreciate when Ellen White says that we are not to worry about what the papacy is up to, but more, what it is that we are up to, in our own lives. And that if we spent more time understanding Daniel and Revelation, we'd actually spend less time attacking the churches that we believe are represented in there, because of the conviction of ourselves. I think that you spoke to earlier, Doc, that we would see ourselves in this whole thing being played out, and how God needs to really wash and regenerate us.
Love those comments. I like we bring out the Laodicea. So Seventh-day Adventists, when they read Revelation, they see Revelation 13 and Revelation 17 as being considerably an indictment of institutional Christianity. But at the same time, Adventists have seen the message to Laodicea as an indictment of Adventism. So I think what I put together in this particular piece was the idea of accountability. I said, we need to hold each other accountable. It's okay to hold other people accountable. And it's okay for us only to the degree we're willing to receive accountability from others. We're willing to listen to Catholics, listen to Protestants, listen to Jews and Muslims when they have concerns about Seventh-day Adventists. And so I think what we have seen in Revelation fits to a T the reality of the human condition, is that we're all flawed, and that no church is pure and perfect, except as an ideal. And in recognizing the flaws of others, it is useful to the degree we recognize flaws in ourselves as well. We've got about 3 minutes left here. One other question I had to ask, and that is, the dragon makes war against the remnant. We'll get to the remnant next time. But the dragon makes war with the remnant, but he does it by going away. What's going on there? He goes away to make war. Guillermo, you had a thought on that, I think.
Well,
earlier.
it could be that he's going away to, because he goes, the woman is in the land, the wilderness, and it could be that he's going away toward the sea, because next thing we see, he's standing on the sand of the sea. So it could be that he's going toward the shore, and I don't want to spoil the next scene, but that's when some very interesting things happen when other characters pop up. I really don't want to spoil the narrative.
Yeah, that's okay. But what I hear you saying is that the dragon doesn't do a frontal assault because the dragon doesn't feel strong enough.
Well, it's interesting because it seems to be a different strategy, and it has a similar structure. So first, he stands before the woman. Didn't work. Now he stands on the sea, on the sand, and then other characters will come, evil characters will come, and then it's like they're gonna go to battle together. And so it could be a change of strategy.
All right, so the dragon changes strategy. We got about a minute left. Nick, Michael, any thoughts on the dragon's war?
When I think about going off to make war with the rest of her children, and I, again, could be totally off, I just get the idea of, if the woman represents this church, that now this church is multiplied and is spread, and now he has to go make this strategic attack against all of those that are in harmony with who she is, that are spread throughout.
So you're seeing it not so much of where he's going, but you're seeing it of where he's coming from. He was attacking the woman, but somehow the appearance of the remnant is pulling him off of the woman, which fits maybe with the connection with 17 that we've been talking about. All right. I think that was a helpful discussion. Well, we're coming to a close of another GPS. I promised you a Rip Snorton session, and I think we had one. And looking forward to see you again next time.